No.
No.
Yes. No.
Goodness me, we've got enough violence in the world without bringing more of it into our dining room.
Because my little brother does the turtles on me.
Did, you know?
Comes up to me and goes, ha! He beats me in the nuts all the time.
I never let my child watch cartoons.
Yeah, I don't think it's the cartoons that matter so much because that's cartoon violence, and I think even children can understand that's not real.
Cartoons are a curious one from our point of view. Let me put it the way it was put to us by a group called ACTAC, that's Australian Children's Television Action Committee, and they want a count of violent actions. They want a quota that includes cartoons. We can count the number of violent acts per 10 minutes or whatever, and we say, aha, you've done your 80 violent acts, that's it for that hour, you know, the rest of it has to be Hearts and Flowers, Julie Andrews, all that.
The actual cartoons, even though they can be very violent, I think are too remote from their everyday lives to have much of an effect on the actual child. I think they get far more detrimental behaviour from things they might see in movies or serials, action-packed kind of shows.
Our research endeavoured to look at whether people were upset violence, and we found that yes, they were. The Broadcasting Tribunal did a study into violence. It attempted to steer clear of this because it's an area which is subject to an awful lot of controversy. People will say, oh yes, people get it out of their system by watching violence. The people who want to show violence, because violence is a stimulant, it gets people excited, people will pay more attention to their television shows and therefore to the ads in the television shows. They will say it doesn't affect people, of course.
Some children will watch something violent on television and then relive it through their games. When they come to the playground, they'll play aggressively with other children, bringing in the images they had seen on television. Whereas other children won't do that at all, but they will learn from the more aggressive child, I think.
That's for making me come to Mars.
I think there's just far too much violence on television as it is at the moment, and I think it's just too accessible to young children. Perhaps, as the Prime Minister said, one solution to this would be to start the adult shows later on in the day and make a clear distinction between children's viewing time and adult viewing time and have nothing much in between that.
Some American research has shown for teenage boys, I think they usually use teenage boys for this kind of thing, that if they are predisposed to violence in their lives and they see violence shows on television which are like their lives, then that will make them more violent. Dr. Patricia Edgar from the Children's Television Foundation put it to these people that perhaps there were different sorts of violence, that the violence in cartoons was pretty stylised. It happens to characters who are drawn rather than characters who are real people, and that portraying a rape, for instance, might be quite a different issue.
Quarterback is toast.
Some of the videos that little children are watching and coming to school telling us about are really, really out of their league. I think a much tighter control should be introduced in this area.
Run, little motherfucker.
Because quite often big brothers or sisters will go and borrow something that's very suitable to them, but bring it home, sit down with a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old child and watch it right through, and it's really not good enough.
We don't get as much complaint about violence. I suppose I should say this. We get very little complaint about violence, in fact, compared to sex, and even compared to language, which may mean that people are used to it, I don't know. The inquiry into violence that we did was given to us by the government after the Queen Street shootings and the Hoddle Street shootings, and certainly when that sort of thing happens, someone is going to say, yes, he watched too much violent television, he was a psychopath, he watched violent television, television has an influence.
I don't particularly like violence. Obviously there's a lot on television, but I don't think that there should be laws arbitrated by the television companies or whatever to lower that. There's got to be freedom of speech.
Well, I think there's a lot of people with a lot of idle time on their hands, yeah. yeah, if they sit and watch violence on TV, and they're unemployed or whatever, yeah, I think it's very bad.
Good source of power. Football's pretty violent.
The turtles, right? Little kids come up, they nunchucky and shit.
Red Hot Chili Peppers concert was grouse last night too.
I got some teeth, kid.
We just missed our tram, I think.
Don't worry about it.
The young, immature minds, something like yourselves, get carried away with the violence, the feuding and the rape, and yes, of course there's too much violence. How's that?